comfortably zoned with the Zig Zag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. We are back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, flying high over the zone in Alameda, California, down by the lagoon, where it always is a little pungent. That's part of the good, the bad, and the ugly about Alameda, California, where across the bay from San Francisco, the northern part of California in the United States of America. And we're into our 5th year of podcasting. We're now associated with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network out of Alameda, California, where we have a minimum of 7 podcasts a week that we publish, and it's mostly baseball, but there's a little bit of political science, a little bit of social stuff going on, and my show kind of covers it all. I fight the unholy trinity, which is, in my opinion, the government, the organized religion, and the big business, the unholy trinity. They combine and they really support each other in messing up we the people in a number of different ways. If you want to start with the government, such as it is, a good example of how we're messed up is this very election primary on both sides. And I have as a guest, returning to the mic after quite a while away, a regular, Brother Scott from Rockland, California. How you doing, Brother Scott?
I'm doing all right, thanks, Dave.
This is the first week you're up in Rockland, and Rockland is a little bit of east of Sacramento. And tell us about the temperature in Rockland today.
I believe it was around 106 today, and it has been for the last day or two, and it's projected to be something near that for the next day or two.
Okay. And all goes with the territory. One of the reasons that you're up there is that pretty much the rents in Alameda, the prices of homes in the Bay Area have gone nuts. And we've experienced this over the last 3 or 4 years. You've been retired 4 or 5 years. Your wife just retired, Diane Gilpin, who is a wonderful maid and is now retired. We're gonna block out the names. We're gonna edit all that stuff out for publication. So she gets to retire, and you guys get to move up there in your new home in Rockland. And I'm excited for both of you. I just want to tell you that.
It's a different world. I grew up for 10 years at least in Arizona, and this is a half a step back towards Arizona.
Okay.
The temperatures are similar.
All right.
And so are the demographics.
So the demographics.
Although, I have to say, after having only been there a short time, more than one person has commented to me when they learned we came from the greater Bay Area, commented something like, oh, so you've joined the migration, or you've joined the wave, because I guess there's a mass migration out of the Bay Area into more affordable areas, not so far away. And in that sense, at least, we're not alone.
That's nice. Little company. You have a clubhouse situation. Have you met any of the folks in the clubhouse?
You're torturing me. I got up this morning and looked out the door and saw a woman walking by, middle-aged, kind of a dumpling, attractive, but
5 by 5?
Yeah, comfortable,
right?
Pleasant, somebody you'd like to know.
Yeah.
Walking by with her dog, and she introduced herself, and we introduced ourselves, and she said, "Don't forget to come by for the social at the clubhouse on Friday. You'll be able to meet all the other residents in the park, and we're going to start a league for shuffleboard."
She didn't say that.
And lawn bowling. Which would you prefer?
Now, that had to take some contemplation because they both have their advantages. Lawn bowling is basically bocce, am I correct?
I don't know. It looks the same to me. I prefer darts in a bar.
Well, what are you going to miss most about the Bay Area, about Alameda? Seriously.
Besides friends like you?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what makes a place, is the people you know.
Right.
Clearly. I'm going to miss the climate. It's in the 70s here. It's beautiful. It gets a little chilly at night, and up there, it's very nice at night. But throughout the day, I'd rather be here. Oakland has one of the best climates in the world.
And we're right across the man-made estuary, if you will, from Oakland. Talk about the differences between Oakland and Alameda, and what is myth, what is real when you think about Alameda as a bedroom community of Oakland, that the moat goes up, so to speak. Describe that. Tell me your feelings about it.
I will tell you this. I have to be frank. When I first moved here in 1979, it had a small town feel to it, something not quite like Mayberry RFD, but something provincial, something small town, something contained, manageable. More or less, 50s or 60s, but my point is it was small town Americana, as you might imagine it. And it was attractive because it was quiet, it was a bedroom community, and it was also, in addition to having the advantages of small town familiarities, it was surrounded by big city attractions. San Francisco's 15, 20 minutes away. Oakland's 5, 10 minutes away. Berkeley, 10, 15 minutes away. San Jose's not even that far away. All of these are big cosmopolitan communities with a lot to offer in terms of culture, music, restaurants, recreation, all sports, all kinds of things. So you had the advantage in Alameda of small town, close neighborhood environment, surrounded by big city attractions that you could have at your disposal. And it was ideal to have the best of both worlds. Since then, in the ensuing years, in the ensuing decades, Alameda's undergone a bit of a transformation like a lot of the country has. A lot of gentrification has happened. And from being a predominantly blue-collar, working-class town with a Navy base that employed thousands of people, it has become a bedroom community for Silicon Valley. A lot of techies moving here, a lot of young couples, millennials, making 3-figure or 6-figure salaries, and buying up property at extravagant rates, which tends to drive out the people who are living on a working-class budget, on a typical working-class budget. And that's sad to see, because a lot of what created the charm of the neighborhood will disappear. And it'll become more monocultural, sort of like those green turf lawns you see on some people's houses. They do look nice, but there's not much variety there.
Now, what's Rockland like 2016? I don't know if we talked about this much, but when I first came out here 50 years ago in the Air Force, 50 frickin' years ago. Exactly. It was April of 1966. And one of the first people I met was a woman who lived in Rockland, California. Now, I haven't been up there much since. Rockland Road, which is the exit you take when you go home, is the same exit that was at one time in 66 a gravel road that led up to Sierra College, small junior college getting started back then. And tell me what's changed about the topography over the years, and has it built up to like a strip mall type thing, or is it? You tell me.
Well, at first blush, it's pretty homogeneous. That is, predominantly white bread, pasty-faced, chubby, big SUVs, a lot of bumper stickers that say support the troops on a gas-guzzling SUV, a Ford Exhibitionist, perhaps. And it's not unfriendly to Donald Trump. It's Trump-friendly territory. So even though it's within a stone's throw of the Bay Area, it's far back into the hinterland attitude-wise. That's not to say that's true of everybody there, because like I said, there's been a migration out of the Bay Area, and there are certainly homegrown, what we might call, in flattering terms, progressive people. They're not absent. You do run into them. But the predominant flavor is Wonder Bread. The predominant architecture is shopping malls and suburban subdivisions, cheek by jowl, chock-a-block, one after the other. No charm. Difficult to tell when you've left one town and entered another.
Are you from the Chamber of Commerce?
I don't think the Chamber of Commerce would approve this message.
Just checking. All right. Let's talk specifically about life in Alameda and some of the niceties that you're going to miss in terms of restaurants, shopping. Give me your favorites. Give me what you like about Alameda. I'm not the Chamber of Commerce, but I live here, and I really dig it, and you did too over the years. What are some of your favorite places? Unsolicited, we get nothing from anybody in return for mentioning their names, but what are some of the day-to-day shopkeepers, the books? Yeah, tell me about Alameda from day to day.
Well, it's a pretty diverse town. And that's part of its charm. It's not without its tensions, but compared to other places, it's relatively stress-free. It's a great place to raise kids. Got a lot of cute and charming shops, restaurants, things of that nature. No real downtown, but a couple of shopping streets that attracts people. It's a destination point for boulevardiers who like to sample all the Epicurean delights along Park Street. You can find cuisine from Cuba, China, Thailand, India, Vietnam, Mexico, Americana, you name it. It's there, and it's within walking distance if you can find a place to park.
Well, we did build a monstrosity the previous 2 administrations ago. The mayor, Beverly Johnson, decided in her honor to build a monstrosity. And it's a big, ugly, biggest building in town. There's a lot of controversy over it. And nobody uses it to park. They will drive around looking for a spot that is unavailable for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times before using the parking garage. What's the adversity about that? What do you attest that to?
Well, first of all, to the charge of driving around multiple times around the block before deciding to check out the parking garage that you talked about, which is an ugly monstrosity. It is nevertheless useful, and eventually we all decide to bite the bullet and go into the parking garage we all loathe because there's no place to park on the street. On Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday evening, forget about it. I was lucky enough to live within walking distance of most of the attractions, and I don't envy anyone who is looking for a place to park anytime between Wednesday and Sunday night to go down on Park Street, sample the restaurant fare, stop in at an ice cream parlor, have a cup of coffee, or visit a bar. It's tough.
What are your favorite eateries in Alameda? And break it down maybe by cuisine. I know there's a multitude of different choices. And what do you like best?
Well, for 30 years or more, we've visited La Penca Azul, formerly known as La Piñata. It's one of the most popular Mexican food restaurants in town. Actually, correct that. It's one of the most popular restaurants in town. And I'm told that it pays the highest tax revenues to the city of any business in town. If not the highest, certainly among the highest. Great food, great bar. It's a tequila bar, so they have all kinds of tequila at various prices to sample. And it's open until 3 in the mornings, I think. So it's doing a thriving trade. It's always busy, and we've been going there for decades. I like it a lot. If you want to do a walk-in, take-home burrito, a take-out burrito, Ramiro Brothers is great for that. I love Ramiro Brothers. You line up, you get your order, they give it to you quickly. It's consistent, it's cheap, it's good. We like the Thai restaurant.
Which one?
You caught me. I don't remember the names of them. There's a couple of good ones right on the Park Street. Some of them not without controversy. I understand that the owners of one of them was hit heavily with fines for shortchanging its employees, and they had to pay lots of money in back wages to employees that it had shorted. I do not approve of that. But the Thai restaurants are good. The Italian restaurants are good.
Which Italian restaurant do you like best?
Linguini's is most people's favorite, but not mine. It's okay. I don't object to it. It has two sides, the bar side and the dining side. The bar side serves pizza, beer, and lighter fare. I actually prefer that side. The formal dining side, it's fine. I don't have any objection to it. I'll go there at the drop of a hat. But Tomatina's is also good. Chiara Una Volta is also good, and for atmosphere, I prefer that.
How about the Chinese restaurant that's up on the second floor? What is that called? China
House.
China House. Tell me about that.
People go there for the view, because from the second floor, you can sit at a window booth and see the intersection, probably the busiest intersection in all of Alameda, right below you. So you can watch the passing parade while you eat your delicious Chinese food and swat the cockroach off the wall that's crawling next to you.
Oh, that's very, very appetizing. But, we could go back to the Mexican restaurant that you were so fond of. They had a little Ebola scare and were closed down for a while. So everybody in the biz goes their way, good, bad, or indifferent.
Wait, that's corrected. That was a hepatitis scare, and it was one of the kitchen help who evidently brought his ailment to work because he couldn't afford to take off work.
Well, I see your hepatitis, and I raise you multiple sclerosis.
All right. For a while there, it was iffy, but they've recovered from that.
It was iffy, and I think Ebola was mentioned, but only by the health inspectors. It didn't get into the papers or anything. I like them. They're good people, and they make a great breakfast. Speaking of breakfast, on the other side of town, there is it Arnold's?
Albert's.
It's Albert's. I've been in this town for 23 years, and I can, because of Fonzie, I'm forced to call that restaurant Arnold's. It's Albert's. They've gone through a bunch. They have a rich history. Tell me about Albert's, their history, what's going on now. I love that place.
Albert's is what we used to call in Arizona a gritzo. Gritzo, a gritzo restaurant.
Never heard that.
Well, it's kind of Southwest Spanglish for a greasy spoon. But the food is good, especially the breakfast. The place, as I recall, from 1979 on, was owned by some Cuban immigrants who came here from Cuba, and they named it after their second son, Alberto. Alfonso, their first son, was playing in a rock and roll band and had more time available for the band than for the restaurant. Alberto became the namesake for the restaurant. Eventually, the family sold the restaurant to the head chef, a fellow from Mexico named Alfonso. Excellent breakfast chef, excellent lunchtime chef, excellent short order cook. The place is staffed by some colorful people. People from the 60s, Carla, Linda, and others. Easygoing people, happy to welcome you, treat you like family, easy to get to know, easy to talk to, and we like the atmosphere. It's casual. Some of the items on the menu are homemade creations, like the hippie special, which is just a lot of tomatoes and onions and stuff on top of your hashed brown potatoes, and other unique creations that make the place charming, and it's inexpensive.
Beautiful. You're not a pizza eater by any stretch of the imagination. Any experience? What is your family like? What is Diane like? What is Rich like?
Well, you taught me to appreciate New York-style pizza with the thin crust, because in my advanced age, I've developed type 2 diabetes, so I have to watch my carb intake. So in an effort to reduce carbohydrates, as part of that effort, I've gone away from the bready pizzas that California is famous for, and adopted the New York style of thin crust pizza with not very much bread or carbohydrates in it. And I actually have learned to prefer it, and I like it a lot. There's that place on Park Street that sells New York pizza that's run by an Afghan family.
Yes.
You know the name of it, and I love the pizza.
Yes, it's New York, I don't know, New York pizza, that's what they call it. And that guy's never been to New York in his life, but he got a recipe, and it works. And it's not quite New York pizza, not much is. There's a few others in town that come really close. What's the place over by Lucky's on Encinal? Why can't I think of it right now? There's A-Town Pizza up on Webster that is delicious. And I can't think of the place either, but the best pizza in the East Bay area that is as close to New York pizza as possible is Ardenel's. I don't pronounce it very well because I'm in radio, so it goes with the territory. They have great, it's on Center Street in Berkeley, Ardenel's, I think it's called. Center and Shattuck, and it's got terrific pizza, and they sell it by the slice, and it's as close to New York pizza as I remember New York pizza being, and I'm going to get to compare it in 2 or 3 weeks. Tally and I are venturing back east by Amtrak for a neighborhood reunion in Jackson Heights, New York, where we rented an Airbnb or whatever they call them, where we have access to that for 13, 14 days. We're going to be right across basically right across the river from New York City. We're 20 minutes away, just like Alameda is 20 minutes away from San Francisco. Alameda, weather notwithstanding, is a lot like Jackson Heights, New York, in a lot of ways. Diversity, many restaurants. My kid went to school here in Alameda, and they have 26 different dialects spoken by children in Haight Elementary School. 26 people from all over the world. We're a melting pot. It's a lot like New York. What are the political concerns in Alameda as you see them? Give me a little bit of what's going on with the Renters Coalition and what have you, just as you see it from your standpoint. It got on the ballot. You read the paper every day. When the Sun comes out, the Alameda Sun comes out, you read it. It's one of the few actual newspapers available in this country anymore. For us locally, newspapers are dwindling. We're both newspaper guys, and we're going to miss it when the Internet is the only place to get our news. But for local news, there's the Alameda Sun. What have you been reading, and what's going on that you can tell people about in a very, very unbiased manner?
Just briefly, the number one issue seems to be rent control. And this is a mirror that reflects the mood across the country and probably outside the country as well. Real estate values, as part of the larger economy, have been on a roller coaster ride for the last couple of decades. Up and down and up and down, and people making fantastic sums, taking out equity loans, using their home equity as an ATM machine, and then alternating that with crashes in prices that cause people to be foreclosed upon and enter bankruptcy proceedings and all kinds of strife and grief and divorce and alcoholism and wife beating and drug addiction and who knows, all kinds of stuff as a consequence of that. Alameda is not immune to that. Alameda, as an island city, doesn't have a lot of room for development. Rental housing stock is in short supply. There's been a spillover from Silicon Valley, that is all the way south from San Jose north to San Francisco and areas in between. The techies, as we call them, are tired of paying these stratospheric rents they have to pay in San Francisco and Menlo Park and other places. They come over to Oakland or to Alameda to pay something less than that. But something less than that for them still means astronomical prices for us. For instance, we rent a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment for $1,650 a month. That's $1,650 a month. The rent has gone up $300 in the last 3 years. $75 one year, $75 the second year, $150 the next year. That's $150 a month. And it's still not at market rates. We are still renting an apartment for below market rates. Long story short, a lot of people are heading out of the area, having to make that long commute on overcrowded highways and overcrowded mass transit systems to get back to work in San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose. But Alameda has been hit by that same surge in real estate prices, and it's driving us nuts. That's the number one political issue in the town. There's a rent control ordinance that's been put on the ballot for November, a referendum. There's a counter measure that's been put on the ballot by the city itself, which calls for simple rent review and mediation rather than rent control. Details to be worked out later. And then there's a third measure, which I understand has not yet made the ballot, but threatens to make the ballot, and that's fostered by a landlord group, which is to be a charter amendment, an amendment to the city's charter, making it illegal to control rents forevermore. So you have three contending measures, all on the issue of rent control. That's the number one issue in this town.
Now, I am a member of the Alameda Renters Coalition, and I've had over the past 2 years 4 or 5 different shows with members of the group, people who have been in peril, such as yourself, suffering the ill effects of this. And, must have been about a year and a half ago, I told the Renters Coalition that you better strike now. Get an organized rent strike where you put the bucks in a fund. What do they call it?
Escrow fund.
An escrow fund. And it's all done legally. And you will make the system turn around. Because as you and I have agreed, and based on just exactly what you said, to fight the Renters Coalition thing that they got put on the ballot, the city government and the landlords, big business, have combined to mess with the people. Now, who's going to be making the decision on this? Is it the judges in courts? Well, they go to the same country club as the landlords and the big businesses and the city administrators. They're all in the same cahoots with each other, the same boat. So we, the people, are going to be stymied. We, the people, I predict, are going to be stymied in November because they'll confuse it so much, and you got 3 different measures going on, that nothing's going to get a majority, and the people, again, will be faced with starting all over again and trying to negotiate a stabilization of rents that doesn't cause people to be put out of their lifestyle after years and years. It's just not fair. Not fair to the retired folks, not fair to the people who are trying to raise a family on just one income and have a stay-at-home parent. That's impossible to do anymore. And just that is a social program of getting people to be able to stay home with their kids as a result of stabilizing the rents would make it all worthwhile. Because if you have guidance as a child in preschool and in your first 5 years, you're not farmed out to a babysitter who has 9 children to take care of legally per person in charge, per person child care. Your kid's not going to get enough attention. Ergo, your child is not going to be prepared to enter school with a chance to succeed. And it all comes back to big business, city government, state government, federal government, and we could interject a third, organized religion of any kind. that gets a tax-exempt ride for their businesses. Pure and simple. They're living off folks here who are paying taxes. And that's the way it is. And what do you see as change? What can we do to change? We're right in the middle of a Democratic-Republican standoff where we have, I think, the two most untrustworthy, scary people running against each other that we've ever had. We've never had a candidate like Trump. We've never had a candidate like Clinton on a different level who has been called negligent by the FBI, not charged with a crime that others in her position, extremely negligent, Scott reminds me, and not charged with crimes that others have been serving prison for the same thing. You got a general serving 6 months in time for being negligent with classified information. If he didn't know it was classified, that's his fault. That's his problem. There's a general out there serving problem. I don't know his name. Others have been charged with, even though she did not mean to give away information, it wasn't treasonous. They said, well, that's why we're not charging. Others have been charged under the same circumstances. She wasn't. I understand that. Got to band together to stop Trump. There has to be some conspiracy along the way to do that. But for the DNC to literally skew the primaries and declare before a vote was cast Hillary Clinton as the presumptive presidential candidate is absolutely disgusting to me. I mean, suits are being filed right now. This big protest as we speak in the last day of the Democratic convention. They've got to come together. But what are we going to have again? We're going to have pulling the lever for the lesser of two evils and no progression, regression. She's not a progressive candidate. She doesn't want to legalize marijuana. She doesn't want to do anything about the environment. She doesn't want to stop fracking. She doesn't want to stop going to war. They've had a war going on for every moment of the Obama administration. He hasn't stopped that. A lot of what he didn't accomplish was the fault of the Republicans literally holding him back, showing a racism in this country that we thought we were well beyond when the guy got elected. Sure proved us wrong. These people are crazy as ever. That held him back. But, there's some things he's got to take responsibility for. He still drones. He still waterboards. Things that wiretaps, the same. Guantanamo exists. He said he would eliminate that in the first 15 minutes that he was president. That hasn't happened. They came to him. They patted him on the back, and they said, you know what? You're driving the bus. But we're determining the route of the bus. So you just drive the bus, shoot some hoops in the backyard, raise your lovely family, put the image out there as if you're doing something.
Stay out of the way.
And stay out of the way. And you know what we're going to do? The woman that called you a bad name when she was running against you, when you ran in the primaries.
The first time?
The first time. You remember her? She was Hillary. You know what you had to do to placate the powers
played the race card against you.
They made you, in turn, do two things. They made you appoint her as Secretary of State, number one, and they made you come to her primary and wholeheartedly recommend her as not being irresponsible.
Except that I got to put a fine point on that. I don't think Obama was made to do that. They were sure happy that he did that. They leaned on him to do that, but they didn't even have to lean on him to do that. He did that willingly because that is his bent. He is of the same stripe.
Which means that they are all kind of left, kind of right of what Richard Nixon were, to the right of Richard Nixon. When you look back upon it, isn't that what it's evolved to?
It is ironic that Richard Nixon, the Cold War icon, fervent anti-communist, anti-labor demagogue, became the president who, quote-unquote, opened the door to China, ended the Vietnam War, began the Environmental Protection Agency.
Well, he didn't end the Vietnam War.
I'm sorry.
I mean, he was already gone and Johnson was in.
No. Johnson was before Nixon. Nixon got left office ahead of impeachment proceedings. The war was soon lost. It was going to be lost anyway, and it was soon over after he left.
Okay, I think that was Ford, though.
Ford presided over the unfurling of the flag for the last time, but that course was already set under Nixon.
Okay. And today we have more wars going on than ever. Tell me about ISIS and who's fighting them, and can we win that battle, and what's going on over there as you see it?
Well, we're traveling all around the world.
Yeah, because I don't get you in the 420 studios very often.
ISIS. Well, I think ISIS would side with the landlords in Alameda.
I understand that. Well, tell us if you can't tell us about ISIS specifically, tell us about our allies, Saudi Arabia, and how we both kind of look at them as, and the UN, all of that, how we've reached the point that our allies are Saudi Arabians.
Well, that's a long story.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
I can't remember his name precisely. I think it's Kinzer. I want to say Joseph Kinzer. He wrote a book called All the Shah's Men. I'm sorry if I'm botching his name. It's an excellent book. It's well worth reading. And he outlines some of that history. To put it in short order, Saudi Arabia somehow became a stalwart ally of the White House under both Republican and Democratic administrations, including the Obama administration. The Saudi family is a feudal monarchy. It runs the peninsula that is named after the family. Saudi Arabia literally means Arabia of the Saudi family. It's a family with a flag on an ocean of oil. They are descendants of Bedouin nomads who wandered and are fabulously wealthy beyond imagining. It's just amazing how much money they have. They jet off, many of them, to Monte Carlo and Monaco and consort with hookers and drink liquor and gamble, and meanwhile imposing strict Sharia law on the subjects of their feudal monarchy. They could teach their bastard offspring in ISIS a thing or two about how to cut off people's heads neatly and cleanly, because they've been doing it for decades, and they put everyone else to shame.
So how do we get entangled with them, and how do they, of all countries, end up as our allies? And Iran, for instance, well, they seem to be our adversaries.
Well, as the Iron Maiden of Great Britain, the late Maggie Thatcher, God damn her soul, used to say, they are people with whom we can do business. That means they can keep law and order. They can keep the oil and the profits derived therefrom flowing to the West. Everything else is secondary.
So basically what you're saying is that I wouldn't say, let's just say the NATO alliance in general, it's all about the bucks. There's no humanness involved. There's no not human kindness, humanity involved whatsoever. It is strictly about the bucks. The oil and probably the missionaries are in there on one level or another. You want to address that?
I don't know. I'm losing track of where we're going, but I'll say this about NATO. I don't understand why it exists anymore. What's the point? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was formed, as it described itself, as a bulwark against the expansion of communism emanating from the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union ceased to exist in 1991 and 1992. We're now living...
We got cars going by.
We're now living in 2016. The Soviet threat, as it were, has long ago vanished. Why is there a NATO today? I think the average Russian has good reason to wonder why NATO, as a military alliance, is creeping closer and closer to its borders each year.
Well, I have a question. If the Soviet Union doesn't exist and they're not a threat anymore, well, why did people make such a big deal the other day with Trump and trying to get the emails from Russia? When you mention Russia to a lot of people, they get the hairs in the back of their neck up. You seem to feel that it isn't a threat. Do you think we're so closely aligned with them at this point where we're just not going to do anything in either of our best interests because we're both so heavily nuclear armed that we both know we're not going to fuck with each other?
There was the doctrine called MAD, an acronym that stood for Mutually Assured Destruction. And during the Cold War era, that meant that the Soviet Union and the United States each had enough nuclear firepower to destroy their opponent multiple times over. And because that threat hung over the heads of both nations and the world, nobody was inclined to pull the trigger or push the button, as it were. So nowadays, Russia no longer is the Soviet Union,
but
and they still have the armament,
and so do we,
and so does the United States.
Which leads us to the other discussion of really should Iran be allowed to have nuclear weapons, and why?
Well, before we get to that, let's deal with mutually assured destruction and what happened to the Soviet army.
It would be the same reason them having the protection of being armed. You could say nobody's going to fuck with them because they don't want to be blown up. And it would assure world peace on some level.
I think an argument can be made for that. It's not necessarily a good argument in all circumstances, but it's a decent argument for many circumstances. If I'm the average Persian or Iranian sitting in a cafe in Tehran, I'm thinking to myself, hey, wait a minute. Our neighbor next door to the west, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, was accused of having weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations sent in inspection teams which discovered that no such weapons existed or could be found. It gave, in essence, the all-clear signal to the United Nations and the United States, which then sent in the force nicknamed Shock and Awe. It bombed the holy crap out of Iraq. once it learned there were no weapons of mass destruction. If I'm an Iranian, I'm comparing the fate of Saddam Hussein with the fate of Kim Jong-un and the North Korean regime. Considered equally despotic, brutal, and cruel, and not without reason. On the other hand, the Kim family still rules North Korea because the Kim family has at least a six-pack of nuclear weapons to toss at Tokyo and a few other major cities. And if they go down, those places go down too. So the Kim family still rules. If I'm an Iranian, I'm thinking to myself, we need to get us some of that so we don't go down like Iraq did, based on true or false pretenses, because everyone knows now that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that was a pretext.
So, let's just conclude from that Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, those guys really should be arrested, convicted, and serve time, if not life sentences, for war crimes. Do you concur with that?
I'm not privileged to judge. I would say, man to man, you to me, the war was based on false pretenses. Tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of people died, maybe 1 million or more, if you want to include deaths from the blockade and embargo that Clinton initiated against Iraq. Lots of human suffering, unnecessary human suffering, civilian suffering, for no good reason.
To say nothing of our own forces and the inability to take care of them when they come back, vis-a-vis veteran hospitals and this, that, and the other thing.
Right. Veterans get the short end of the stick, too. But the point is that if the U.S. had lost, abjectly lost in that military effort, the leaders of the country could have been seized and put on trial for war crimes. Not likely to happen. That's reserved for people like neighborhood tin pot dictators like Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia. He's a small fry. We can grab him. When I say we, I mean the United Nations. I shouldn't even use the colloquial term we. The United Nations can grab him at the behest of the United States and Western powers and throw him in the docket and cause him to go to trial. But that's not likely to happen to anybody in Washington.
Okay. What do you see happening?
Well, you can't even convict a cop for murder in this country. So you're going to have a hard time convicting a politician for genocide.
Well, yeah, that is true. The one thing you taught me is the subtle difference between when it all turns to fascism. Now, you would think that because Halliburton, vis-a-vis Cheney, right, combined with government, business combining with government, and boots hitting the floor in Iraq, you would figure that could be fascism. What do you think?
Well, Trump is looking more fascistic with each passing day. However,
I'm talking about back then. Was it fascism what Cheney did? Cheney and Bush?
No.
Okay, tell me why.
It was a corporatist capitalist state executing its own direction.
So when does something like that become fascism?
Fascism, generally speaking, is a post-industrial phenomenon that incorporates the following central elements. State control of the private economy. For instance, Adolf Hitler would dictate to Krupp, to Messerschmitt, to Mercedes-Benz, to Porsche, to Volkswagen, to all of the major German corporations. This is what I want you to produce. This is how many items I want you to produce. This is the price that I want you to charge. I will guarantee you a profit. It was a command economy from the top down, emanating from the center. that was one of its fundamental characteristics. That's not always and everywhere true, but that's certainly true a lot of the time. By contrast, in the former Soviet Union, under Stalin, another dictator, he probably figured, what do I need Messerschmitt for? What do I need Porsche for? What do I need Mr. Mercedes for? If Hitler's going to dictate the price, the quantity, the profit, what good are they? What good are those corporate capitalists? Away with them. I'll just do it myself. And so the public agencies, the arms of the state, the agencies of the state, take direct control and direct ownership and manage the economy. That's a socialist form. It can be dictatorial. It can be democratic. Depends. The capitalist form can be dictatorial, or the capitalist form can be democratic. Under Hitler, it was dictatorial. Trump is nothing like that. Trump's not dictating. Cheney did not dictate. Rumsfeld did not dictate. Bush did not dictate to the private enterprise economy how it will conduct itself. The state control of the economy was lacking. That's a fundamental element of capitalism. That's a fundamental element of fascism. It's a military form of state capitalism, where the state dictates the direction of the economy in a fundamental way. Trump doesn't do that. Cheney doesn't do that. Bush doesn't do that. None of those guys do that.
What would you predict is going to happen between Hillary and Trump?
I don't know. I just read Michael Moore's piece on 5 reasons why Trump's going to win the election. Pretty scary. On the other hand, George Will and others have said that Trump is an unknown factor, whereas Hillary Clinton, we know she's a hawk.
George Will said that?
If it wasn't George Will, it was somebody else who's a prominent...
He's a pretty hawkish son of a bitch, George Will. It must be somebody else you're thinking of.
You might be right. I read today that he had quit the Republican Party, and I associate him with those remarks, but it may have been someone else who actually said Trump is an unknown quantity. Hillary Clinton, you can guarantee she's going to go to war in Syria.
Scary. Hey, we're going to end it. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate you being here, and this will be continued soon. I'm going to end the episode the way I do most. I implore you, Scott, and everyone out there to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your kids out of military recruiting stations and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. And things will be much better. Just by the numbers, just by the odds. Think about that for a few minutes. 4 simple little things, 5 actually. I implore you to keep on keeping on. Adios now.